Hey guys, and welcome to another installment of Exalted Builds, a short series of videos where we go through all the Exalted weapons, and today we're going to take a look at Valkyr and her Talons. Now once again, I'm not going to cover the actual Warframe build in depth because I already made a video about it, so if you would like to know more about my Hysteria setup, you can go in the description and the first link will take you to the appropriate updated build video. But there are a few things worth noting here. Number one, the power strength, which I have at 155%, this affects the damage of Valkyr's Talons. Number two, steel charge, which just like power strength affects the damage of the Talons. And finally number three, arcane strike, which gives you a chance when you hit an enemy to gain some attack speed. You also may have noticed that I'm not using the Eternal War augment on my setup because I don't use Warcry, but if you do, which is completely valid and pretty damn good by the way, you don't need the attack speed on the Talons because Warcry is going to provide that for you. So if that's the case, you can either add more damage or even something like reach or primed reach for more range. So the build I ended up liking the most is a very simple one forma build where I've just added a dash. But if you're not building your Valkyr for full-on Hysteria and you just want to pop in and out every now and then, it's completely fine to just build it on a zero forma setup where you replace the primed versions with the standard versions. It's still gonna do more than enough damage to get things done. Now before we jump into the build, I quickly want to mention the stance once again, which in this case is Hysteria. This is a fairly standard set of attacks. You have the button mash combo, which I personally prefer to use when I'm just running around. It doesn't do as much damage as the block combo, but it keeps you mobile. It allows you to run around really fast. Then there is the block combo, which as I mentioned already, does more damage than the standard button mash, mainly because it has a couple of multi-strike towards the end, but it doesn't give you as much freedom as the standard button mash. It kind of chains you down a little bit more. Then there is the pause combo, where you pause after the second attack. This one does a decent amount of damage, though it may be a little bit hard to pull off if you have a lot of attack speed. But if you can pull it off, you'll be rewarded with a lot of AoE. It has a ton of hits towards the end that strike everything around you. And finally we have the hold combo, where you hold the third attack. This is probably the strongest combo of the bunch because it does a ton of single target damage, but it also has a tendency to knock the enemies on the ground, letting you do ground finishers. And back to the build we go. Now this is basically just like a modern version of a pre-Acolyte crit build. So we have primed pressure point for damage, true steel for crit chance, organ chatter for crit damage, and berserker for a ton of attack speed. Now you might think that you don't need attack speed with 1.5 attacks per second, which is really high, but the animations on the Talons are very long and drawn out, so attack speed definitely helps. Unless of course you're running Eternal War, then you don't really need it. Next on the menu we have Drifting Contact because we can't use body count because it's an Acolyte mod. This is to increase our combo duration, so stacking our combo is much easier and it doesn't fall off as fast. And we top it all off with some elemental damage, so I have Molten Impact for heat damage and Primed Fever Strike with Choking Touch for corrosive damage. Now one thing with Hysteria that makes it a little bit awkward is that sometimes when you're attacking, Valkyr will just pick a random direction and keep attacking in that direction even though you've turned your camera around and there are no enemies there. But there's something you can do about this. If you go into your options and controls, you will see an option to turn on melee auto-targeting. I generally find this really annoying, which is why I always turn it off, but when it comes to Valkyr and Hysteria, I always turn it on. It's not perfect, it does have its issues. Sometimes it will snap onto an enemy that's kind of behind the camera anchor point, so it kind of looks like you're punching the camera instead, but I find that it helps immensely with not punching the air in Hysteria. It effectively increases your DPS because your attacks are far more likely to actually connect with the enemy. And speaking about DPS, it's pretty damn good. Valkyr has always had really good DPS in her Hysteria because, you know, there is a downside. The claws don't have an awful lot of range. The damage is also very consistent across the board because of the physical distribution on the claws. It's split equally between impact, slash, and puncture. Which is why it's so good versus the Sentients, because you hit them with so many different damage types and each one of them hits equally as hard, so they can't adapt fast enough. And that's pretty much all there is to say about this. It's just a really solid melee setup that doesn't require an awful lot to do great things. However, if you do want to invest into it, there is a lot of potential here. I'm seriously considering umbrifying Valkyr because it's just the perfect frame for the Umbra mod, and I'm even thinking about putting just sacrificial steel on the Talons, which even without sacrificial pressure will give you more crit chance, so the crits will be even more reliable than they are now. But just like with Wukong, I wanted to do this video first so you can see the performance on a normal setup before I completely screw up the format by trying to fit in the Umbra mods. So I would highly recommend you give this sort of a standard setup a shot, because there is really no harm in it. You can just try it with the standard mods, and if you like it, you can slap on that dash, put on the primed mods to push it even further, and if you really like it, you can slap on a little bit more format and put on sacrificial steel as well. And as always, I thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video and it was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.
Till we know the air and water flowing on the land we call